"Stop dreaming, Bianca." He didn't shout. He didn't sneer. He just smirked, like he'd already decided she'd never make it. She smiled softly, folding her sketches like they didn't matter. But that night, she didn't sleep. She built a brand new identity. A name, a logo, a business hidden in plain sight. And the day he finally saw her face on the front cover of a national magazine, his fork hit the table. His jaw dropped. And what she said next, it shattered their marriage, or saved it forever. Welcome to Revenge with Luke. Let's uncover what really happened. She'd been sketching designs late into the night for months, her pencil dancing over graph paper as ideas stretched across the pages like spring vines. I watched her from the doorway one evening, the kitchen light spilling over her tense shoulders. "You spend too much time on this," he muttered when she finally stood, rubbing her eyes. "You're chasing dreams that don't pay the bills." His words were soft but heavy, sinking into the hum of the refrigerator. She pressed her lips together, eyes fixed on the sketches of jewelry pieces she imagined women wearing to feel brave. At breakfast the next morning, he cleared his throat in the dining room where orange sunlight pooled on the table. "You need to focus on real work," he said, curling his spoon around her oatmeal. "Stop dreaming." She nodded politely, forcing a smile, but inside her chest trembled with the heat of indignation. As he described his day ahead, meetings at the firm, emails waiting on his return, her fingers tapped the table in rhythm with an unspoken vow. The afternoon air carried the scent of freshly cut grass through the open window when she returned to her small home office, a converted closet in the hall. She flipped on the desk lamp and pulled out her sketches. The whispered dismissal glowed in her mind like an ember refusing to die. She selected the page she'd been most proud of, a delicate pendant inspired by the constellation her grandmother once pointed out in a Texas sky. With steady hands, she traced the lines on a sturdier paper, her heart lifting as the design took shape. Outside, her husband's car crunched into the driveway. She snapped the lamp off, hiding the blueprint beneath a stack of bills. She smoothed imaginary wrinkles from her blouse and joined him in the living room, offering polite updates about errands and errands undone. She spoke softly, carrying a secret spark in her chest. He might have asked what she'd been working on, but instead he leaned back and rubbed his temples, readying for an evening of TV reruns. She hugged him anyway, whispering a promise to herself that the next time he told her to stop dreaming, she would answer not with tears, but with progress. And in the quiet thrum of her determination, the ember blazed brighter than ever. She woke to the soft glow of the desk lamp at midnight, the rest of the house wrapped in quiet. Her husband's slow breathing drifted down the hall like proof that the world outside her thoughts was asleep. But inside her head, ideas tumbled like restless waves. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake him, and padded down the hall to her makeshift office. Pulling open the top drawer of her desk, she retrieved the slender leather notebook she carried everywhere, the one with fraying edges and a faded brass clasp. Its pages were crammed with scribbles, product names she loved, color palettes that made her pulse quicken, half-finished taglines that sounded like promises. She flipped to a blank spread and uncapped her favorite pen, the one that glided over paper like a dancer on ice. "Under the lamp's halo," she wrote. She poured out doubts that curled in her chest, questions about whether anyone would ever care about her designs, fears of failure that chased her like shadows at dusk. Then, her pen leapt to life with more fervor. A vision for her first collection, a whispered narrative of women reclaiming moments of confidence through a simple piece of jewelry. She sketched thumbnail silhouettes of pendants that resembled abstract wings, jotting notes about materials, brushed gold, recycled silver, hand-cut gemstones with hidden engravings. A fresh entry grew into a list. People she could ask for advice, local craft fairs where a booth fee was small enough to risk, even a vague plan to crowdfund the initial production run. Each line was a confession and a vow, inked in the solitude of night, binding her dreams into commitments. Her phone buzzed on silent mode. An incoming email from him, a reminder that a dentist appointment was scheduled for tomorrow morning. She paused, thumb hovering above the screen. She could reply now, mention she couldn't find the forms, or she could wait. She saved the notebook, snapped it shut, and tucked it back into the drawer, a treasure chest of her secret ambitions. Outside, the first rush of dawn light painted the horizon in pale pink. She stood, stretching her shoulders tight from leaning over the desk. She picked up her husband's phone, his world full of schedules and reminders, and hit snooze on the alarm. Tomorrow, she'd dress for the dentist, but tonight, she'd tasted the freedom of writing her own story. And that small confession, inked in a hush before sunrise, felt more honest than anything she'd said aloud. She found it tucked into the back of her favorite cardigan, a tiny metal charm in the shape of a flame dangling from a crooked safety pin. It was the first gift she'd ever given herself, a token of encouragement after she'd watched a video of a female artisan describing how jewelry could change a woman's mood, how a small reminder against her skin could ignite courage. She'd pried open the clasp of an old necklace to loop the charm inside, convinced that carrying her own spark might shield her from the chill of doubt. Now, years later, she held the little flame between thumb and forefinger, its weight a comforting warmth. She'd almost forgotten it, her secret talisman buried beneath seasons of laundry and closet purges. She pressed it against her palm, the grooves of the metal imprinting a message in her mind. This is yours. She rose early and brewed tea for two, though only one cup would be sipped. The steam curled into the morning air as she settled into her home office, placing the charm atop her notebook. The light caught its edges, and for a moment she half expected it to flicker. She inhaled, letting anticipation settle in her chest like sunbeams through a window. She opened her laptop and reviewed the prototype photos from the jewelry maker she'd contacted last week. The samples had arrived overnight. 3 pendants cast in silver, each engraved with an abstract flame. They were close, but not perfect. The engraving was too shallow, the chains too delicate. She made notes in the margins. Deeper etching, sturdier clasps, chain length adjustable, so a customer could choose her own fit. Her finger brushed the charm, and she pictured women wearing these pieces. A teacher smoothing her hair before speaking in front of a class. A mother fastening a brooch before a job interview. A friend pinning a tiny spark to her lapel on a day she needed it most. Behind her, the front door clicked and her husband shuffled in, coat slung over one shoulder. She didn't look up, her focus unbroken. He cleared his throat and asked about dinner plans. Without missing a beat, she named the local play she'd been meaning to see and suggested they stop by the new bookstore after. He nodded and headed down the hall. She exhaled, the spark on her desk glowing in her mind's eye. Each day, she learned to fuel it a little more, to let it guide her decisions, to trust its warmth when doubt threatened to freeze her in place. And with that hidden flame tucked close, she felt a quiet power moving through her veins. She lingered at the kitchen table long after he left for work, the morning light pooling across her sketches like a spotlight on possibility. Mugs of half-finished tea and cold toast formed a circle around her open notebook, each one marking a secret session devoted to refining her designs. The hum of the dishwasher in the next room was the only sound, a reminder that life carried on for everyone else. She'd learned to claim this hour for herself, before emails pinged, before appointments began, before he asked her to pick up milk or call about insurance. These moments belonged to the flicker of inspiration she protected fiercely, scribbling margin notes on chain lengths or weighing the pros and cons of oxidized metal versus polished shine. Her fingers sometimes trembled with excitement. This was when dreams felt like they might leap off the page. Today, she tackled the marketing slogan out loud. She murmured phrases into the stale air. Carry your fire, spark your courage, where your intention. None felt right. She tapped her pen against her chin and glanced at the stove where a lone spoon lay abandoned, its curve catching her, like the arc of a pendant. Inspiration struck, an ember for your everyday. She wrote it down, the words landing like stones in water, sending ripples of possibility across the page. Her phone vibrated on silent, an automated reminder that the cable technician was due in 15 minutes. She closed the notebook, sliding a stack of bills over the pages. The technician would think she'd been catching up on paperwork, not plotting a business launch. She folded her arms around her mug and waited, her pulse steady beneath the calm. He arrived with polite smiles and a toolkit that rattled against his belt. While he crawled under the sink to adjust wiring, she struck up casual conversation, asking about his weekend plans, his family. Her notebook lay hidden behind a casserole dish on the counter, her dinner plans an innocuous prop. When the technician left, promising a call if the signal flickered again, she closed the door with a soft click, her heart humming. She returned to the table, retrieved her notebook, and added the slogan to the top of the page. Stolen moments like these were her lifeline, pockets of time she carved out in plain sight. And with each one, her secret fire grew stronger. The cafe's bell chimed as she pushed open the door, the aroma of roasting beans wrapping around her like a familiar hug. She chose a quiet corner, seating herself at a small wooden table scarred with rings and scratches, the perfect canvas for her scattered papers. Opening her leather portfolio, she spread out thumbnail sketches, color swatches, and scrawled notes. Her latte arrived, crowned with frothy peaks that sank under her pen tip as she scrawled a quick note. Test bronze versus brass accents. The napkin beside her cradled a lipstick red stain, the souvenir of an earlier touch-up before a client meeting she'd secretly canceled. She paused to circle a sketch of a cuff bracelet with an engraving of interlocking wings, imagining how the cafe's warm light would catch its curves. The waitress, a college student with purple streaks in her hair, refilled her cup without a word. She smiled in thanks, never glancing at the design splayed before her. Here, among strangers, she was simply a woman with a book and a coffee, not a wife hiding ambitions behind polite conversation. A business-minded neighbor strolled past, tipping his hat. She waved, careful not to reveal her portfolio's contents. She'd learned that discretion was as crucial as creativity. Every time she spread her dream in public, she risked exposing the fragile ember she kept alight. The latte cooled, and she tapped the table, watching steam curl into the air, then disappear. She jotted a reminder to source leather pouches for packaging, a detail she'd almost forgotten. Beneath the sketches lay budget estimates, tiny numbers that coexisted with lofty ideas. She smoothed the papers into a stack and pressed them flat with her hand, collecting stray coffee stains that felt like badges of honor. Outside, the rain began, pattering against the window in gentle applause. She closed her portfolio with a satisfied sigh. These paper dreams, splattered with coffee's imperfection, were the most real things she owned. She tucked them under her arm and left the cafe, shoulders straight, ready to carry each stained page home. Each smudge was a promise that her secret spark would one day light the world, no matter how messy the process. She held the small cardboard box with reverent caution, fingers hovering before she lifted the lid. Inside lay the first physical embodiment of her dream, a delicate silver pendant shaped like a flickering flame, its edges softly rounded and its center hollowed to catch the light. She cradled it on her palm, the cool metal reel beneath her skin, and felt a thrill and then a tremor of doubt. Back in her makeshift workshop, an old sewing table in the corner of the living room, she placed the pendant on a velvet pad beside its matching chain. The prototype exceeded her expectations. The engraving was crisp, the clasp sturdy, the proportions elegant. But with that satisfaction came the sudden plunge of fear. What if no one wanted it? What if it sat unsold in a dusty box while her savings dwindled? Her husband's voice drifted in from the next room, humming along to a late-night news broadcast. He'd sent her off to bed ages ago. She glanced at the clock, nearly midnight. She felt the practical part of her mind chide her for staying up so late, but the ember inside refused to dim. She clipped the chain through the pendant's loop and held it against her collarbone, imagining how it might look on a customer. Her fingers shook as she lifted her laptop and navigated to a blank web page she'd bought weeks ago. The dashboard blinked, its "Create Your First Product" prompt at her. Her heart pounded. This was the moment of no return. She could still close the tab and tuck the pendant back into its box, pretend this evening never happened. A memory flickered. Humming fluorescent lights above her grandmother's workshop, the comforting clinks of tools against metal, advice whispered about taking risks. She drew a breath, squared her shoulders, and clicked Add Product. The form asked for a title. She typed Ember Pendant. The description field appeared. Her fingers hovered. Then she wrote, a wearable reminder of the spark within, crafted to ignite courage every day. Images uploaded. Price set. She moved the cursor to Publish. Her pulse thundered. She pictured the empty box on the table behind her, the unspoken question it posed. Will it stay that way? Her finger clicked. The site went live. Fear and exhilaration danced together in her chest as she leaned back, watching the glow of possibility unfold on the screen. Sunlight filtered through the stained glass as she slipped into her usual pew, smoothing her skirt and praying her husband wouldn't notice the faint glow of excitement in her eyes. The choir began its hymn, voices lifting in the cool hush of the sanctuary. Around her, neighbors greeted each other, crosses whispered against foreheads, and the smell of incense curled through the air. She clutched her purse against her side. Inside, nestled between her wallet and a paperback prayer book, was a tiny velvet pouch holding the first sale she'd made that week. A single ember pendant she'd wrapped in tissue and tied with a copper ribbon. She'd shipped it discreetly from her home office before dawn, long before her husband stirred. He thought she'd been at the dentist. Instead, she'd logged in early to pack the package and drop it at the post office on her way to work. During the reading, she closed her eyes and centered herself, mindful of the secret humming in her chest. The words of forgiveness and renewal struck chords she felt in her fingertips as much as her heart. She whispered a silent prayer. Thank you for this spark. Help me carry it wisely. After Mass, while everyone lingered for coffee and donuts in the fellowship hall, she slipped out past the refreshment table, nodding to friends who mistook her quick exit for a need to catch the school bus schedule. Outside, the April breeze carried the promise of spring as she retrieved her car keys from her purse. No one suspected that her lips curved into a private smile, imagining the look on her customer's face when she opened the package. She drove home down Maple Street, mind racing with orders to print, messages to answer, and supplier questions to follow up on, all before lunch. Pulling into the driveway, she paused, pressing her palm against the steering wheel. The morning's hush lingered like a breath between moments. Inside, her husband greeted her with a casual question about repairs around the house. She smiled and replied, "Nothing urgent." He nodded and turned to hang his coat. She placed her purse on the counter, the velvet pouch hidden between its folds, and started making coffee. In that quiet domestic ritual, she carried her secret forward, each cup a quiet toast to the business she built, one whispered prayer at a time. She awoke to the soft ping of her phone at 2:17 a.m., the glow of the screen carving a rectangle of light through the darkness. Blinking, she saw a notification from her shop's messaging app. Inquiry: are custom engravings possible? Her heart fluttered. This was exactly the kind of request that could make her fledgling business stand out. Sliding out of bed, she padded across the carpet toward her desk, careful not to disturb her husband beside her. The only sound was the hum of the router and the muted whisper of her own breath. She tapped the message, fingers dancing over the keyboard. "Absolutely," she replied. "I'd love to engrave a special message. What did you have in mind?" Within minutes, the customer responded with a tender note, a mother seeking a piece to celebrate her daughter's recovery. The words settled in her chest like warm embers, fueling a surge of purpose. She drafted options: cursive, block letters, even a tiny heart motif. She sketched possibilities on a scrap of paper, her pen tip moving with eager precision. At 2:45 a.m., she sent mock-up images, annotated with dimensions and pricing. Her finger hovered above send, her mind racing with second guesses. Is this too expensive? Will the font look clumsy on such a small surface? She inhaled slowly and pressed the button. While she waited, she poured a glass of water and stared out the window at the moonlit yard. The world was asleep, but here she was, wide awake, calling courage into the night. It felt clandestine and electrifying, as if she'd stepped into a secret club of dreamers who refused to be bound by daylight's doubts. Her phone buzzed again, confirmation of the order. Relief and exhilaration swept through her. She typed a thank you message and set the phone aside. The numbers on her screen glowed. One more sale, one more life touched by her spark. A faint rustle from the bedroom reminded her of a life waiting behind closed doors. Laundry to fold, bills to pay, conversations to have about the day ahead. But in this midnight hour, she'd answered a call that mattered more, the call to believe in herself. She placed her glass on the desk and shut off the lamp, the room returning to shadow. As she slipped back into bed, the ember of her courage burned a little brighter, promising that each secret call, each sleepless night, was forging the path to her dream. She tucked her laptop into a canvas tote and slipped out the front door before sunrise, the sky still brushed with pre-dawn gray. Her destination was the Midtown Makers Market, a Saturday pop-up where artisans and small brands pitched their goods to buyers and browsers alike. She'd applied weeks ago under a pseudonym, Ember & Company, and secured a booth in the corner, its canopy flap printed simply with her logo, a stylized flame. Setting up, she arranged her display of pendants, bracelets, and brooches on small risers and velvet pads. Each piece gleamed under the string of fairy lights she'd installed the night before. She'd printed discreet business cards that invited visitors to ignite your inner spark. No one around her knew she was Bianca, wife of the local accountant, mother of Amelia. Here, she was Ember, entrepreneur. The market opened with the jangle of the gate bell and a rush of early shoppers clutching tote bags. She greeted each passerby with a warm smile and a gentle hello, holding back the tremor in her voice. One woman paused, picking up an ember pendant and holding it against her neck. "This is beautiful," she said, tracing the flame's curve with a fingertip. "It's inspired by quiet courage," Bianca replied. "Ember, a reminder you carry with you." The shopper nodded thoughtfully and placed an order on the spot. Boyd, she continued pitching, a bridal party interested in custom pieces, a boutique owner asking about wholesale pricing, a graduate seeking a gift for her mentor. Each interaction was a small victory, her confidence growing with every question she answered. Midway through the morning, a representative from a regional lifestyle magazine wandered by. She paused at Bianca's booth, lifting a sample to the light. "Would you be interested in a feature? We're profiling new designers," the editor said, scribbling notes on a pad. Bianca inhaled sharply. This was beyond her wildest hopes. She kept her hands steady as she exchanged a card and agreed to an interview. Inside, her heart thundered. This pitch, under a borrowed name and hidden identity, was working. As the market wound down, she packed up her unsold stock and counted her earnings, double what she'd risked on sample orders. Under the unassuming Ember & Company banner, she'd sold more in one morning than she had dared imagine. With the last box stowed in her car, she brushed off her palms and offered a silent toast to herself. Ember was more than an alias. It was the spark that would carry her forward, one incognito pitch at a time. She sat at her dining table, the only light coming from her laptop screen, and stared at the domain registration page, emberandco.com. The registration fee blinked at her in bold type. Less than she'd expected, but still a commitment. She pictured writing her husband a casual email. Just registered a new website. He'd frown, maybe question her priorities. She didn't want permission. She wanted momentum. Instead, she clicked confirm and watched the cursor spin. Ember & Company was officially hers. A thrill rippled through her, quickly followed by a stab of guilt. She leaned back and closed her eyes, recalling breakfast that morning. Her husband flipping through financial statements, asking why their savings hadn't grown. She'd mumbled something about market volatility and changed the subject. Now she thought of the cost of the domain, an expense he'd never approve. She pictured him at the office, suit jacket draped over his chair, phone vibrating with clients and colleagues. He believed in numbers, spreadsheets, and certainty. Ember & Company was none of those things. It was instinct, hope, faith in an untamed idea. Her finger hovered over the support email field. She wrote a brief note to her web host. "I'm excited to get started. Please direct the domain to my hosting plan. Thank you." Then she hit send. No mention of financial concerns. No invitation for debate. A notification pinged. "Welcome to your new domain services." Ember and Company was live, albeit blank. She shut the laptop and exhaled. The hush of the apartment felt louder now, as if it had heard her secret and waited to see what would happen next. Morning came in a haze of sunrise pink, and she poured 2 coffees, one for him, one for herself. She placed his cup in front of him at the breakfast bar, saying only, "Happy Monday." He murmured thanks, scrolling through his phone. She walked away, feeling the weight of the unspoken between them. Ember and Company existed, but he didn't know. In that silent gap, she found affirmation. A name without his blessing still carried power if she was willing to claim it. And as she sipped her coffee, she felt the first real taste of independence burning on her tongue. She opened her accounting spreadsheet, a familiar grid of numbers that usually brought her comfort, and stared at the 2 columns she'd created: personal expenses and business costs. The personal column held mortgage, groceries, electricity, mundane but necessary. The business column, labeled Ember and Company, contained supplier invoices, domain fees, and prototype shipping. Each entry felt like a secret she tucked behind a ledger line. She balanced the books each evening, long after her husband turned off his office lights, and the house sank into quiet. He expected her to handle their household budget. He trusted her expertise, and she leaned into the role, careful that Ember and Company's expenses never tipped their joint account into the red. She transferred a small, steady sum each paycheck into a business account under her name alone, the kind the bank clerk had set up with her ID and proof of domain ownership. Reconciling the ledgers meant lying by omission. She told him she'd ordered supplies for Amelia's art projects when she'd really purchased extra jewelry boxes. She said she was withdrawing cash for a charity auction when she was funding product photography. Each fib felt taut, like the chain on her pendants, but necessary to keep her dream alive under their roof. One night, a discrepancy jolted her awake, a supplier's invoice higher than expected. She traced the error to her own handwriting. She'd entered the wrong amount. Relief washed over her that it was her mistake, not his discovery. She corrected the figure before he reviewed the statements that afternoon. Later, over dinner, he asked why the grocery balance was lower than usual. She shrugged. "I've been meal prepping for Amelia's finals, so we saved a bit." He nodded, satisfied. She chewed her food slowly, tasting each bite as if it were a lie she'd practiced. Afterward, she retreated to her office and updated her profit and loss forecast. Ember and Company was still in the red, but the gap was narrowing. The numbers glowed like a path forward. She ran her finger over the sheet, imagining the day those red figures turned green. In the balancing act between ledgers and lies, she recognized her own resilience. Every hidden transaction was a step closer to freedom. Every small deception a necessary sacrifice for the spark she refused to extinguish. She held the new box against her chest, heart fluttering as though it were a living thing. This breakthrough prototype was different, a refined version of the Ember pendant she'd tested the night she first launched her site. The metal was now a warm rose gold alloy, polished to mirror-smooth perfection, and the engraving of the flame sat deeper, almost three-dimensional. She opened the box and lifted the pendant by its chain, the weight balanced just right. Backlit by her desk lamp, the piece glowed like a captured sunrise. She imagined it at a showcase, suspended on a model's neck, catching the light and drawing eyes. This felt like more than a prototype. It felt like a statement of what her business could become. She clipped it into a display stand and stepped back, scanning every angle. A message light on her laptop blinked, a notification that a wholesale inquiry had arrived from a boutique 2 states away. She clicked into the email, breath catching as she read. "We love your designs and would like to discuss ordering 50 pieces of this style in rose gold. Please advise pricing and production timeline." Her pulse quickened. 50 pieces meant a production run, real numbers to calculate, real costs to negotiate. She paused at the edge of exhilaration and panic. Could she afford the upfront expense? Could she coordinate manufacturing without her husband noticing? She exhaled, focusing on the pendant. It represented her growth, her refusal to settle for half-realized dreams. She opened a fresh spreadsheet and began plugging in figures: cost per unit, shipping, packaging, even a modest wholesale discount. Each cell filled brought clarity, each formula an affirmation. By the time her husband called from the living room, she drafted a professional response, complete with a concise breakdown and a proposed timeline. She hit send and leaned back, feeling the breakthrough settle into her bones. He appeared in the doorway, surprised to find her so late at her desk. "Still working?" he asked. She nodded, smiling quietly. "Something big," he guessed, noting the glow in her eyes. She held her tongue, choosing silence over explanation. Tonight, the breakthrough prototype and the wholesale inquiry were hers alone. In the hush of the moment, she felt both vulnerable and invincible, ready to turn ember into flame. A ping broke the evening's hush, an email from a customer she'd never met. She clicked it open, curiosity and nerves intertwining. The subject line read, "Thank you for the ember pendant." Inside was a photograph. A woman standing on a city rooftop at dusk, the pendant resting at her throat as streetlights shimmered below. "Dear Ember and Company," the message began, "I received my pendant yesterday, and I wore it this morning to my chemotherapy appointment. When I felt weak, I touched the flame and remembered I had strength. Thank you for creating something so beautiful and meaningful." Her breath caught, words blurred as warmth spread through her chest. One of her creations had become more than adornment. It had become armor. She scrolled down to read stories of small victories. Reaching for the phone instead of hiding, stepping onto the hospital corridor with newfound hope, sharing the pendant story with nurses who asked where they could find one for themselves. Tears welled as she typed her reply. "Thank you for sharing this. Your courage inspires me more than you know. If there's anything I can do, custom engraving, rush shipping, or simply a listening ear, please let me know. Wishing you strength and light always." She hesitated before hitting send, aware this was not a marketing tactic, but a human connection. She leaned back, tracing the curve of her own ember pendant in the reflection of her laptop screen. The crash of a thought. She'd started this business for independence, for financial freedom, for personal validation. But this lived experience, this real impact, was the true breakthrough. Her husband called from the living room, asking if she'd planned dinner. She typed "almost" and closed her laptop, allowing herself a moment to absorb the story. Then she took a steadying breath and stood, adjusting her posture as she walked to the kitchen. In the soft glow of the overhead light, she set the table and prepared plates, each movement grounded by purpose. She carried her own pendant with her, a quiet talisman that had sparked a community. And as she placed the final utensils, she whispered a vow. This was only the beginning. He pushed his plate away before finishing his salad, the conversation trailing off like a loose thread. She sat opposite him, spoon hovering over her soup, the glow from her laptop still fresh in her mind. "You seem distant," he said, placing his fork down. "Everything okay at work?" She paused, choosing her words with care. "Busy," she replied, offering a small smile. She didn't mention the wholesale order or the heartfelt email from her customer. He nodded and shifted topics, closing remarks from the city council meeting, a new project at his firm. His tone was routine, but she heard an edge, as if she'd crossed into unfamiliar territory. Between bites, she caught herself rehearsing explanations that never left her lips. Ember and Company, the late nights, the extra expenses. Instead, she asked about his day and listened to financial forecasts and client concerns. He rarely talked about emotions, but she noticed his brow crease when he spoke of budget tightness, as if money mattered more than her whispered dreams. She reached for the breadbasket, noting the way the candlelight fractured across the table surface. Cracks appeared in their usual rhythm: question and answer, order and reassurance. She'd grown accustomed to steering around his inquiries, but each sidestep felt heavier. She wondered if he sensed it. The ledger lines separating their worlds, the secret she carried in her purse. When he excused himself to take a call in the hallway, she exhaled and lifted her soup. The silence tasted of unspoken things: ambition, betrayal, hope. She swallowed slowly and glanced at the empty seat beside her, imagining it filled with the weight of her hidden business. He returned, phone tucked away, and asked if she'd seen the latest episode of their favorite show. She forced a laugh and said no, she'd fallen asleep early. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Dinner ended in the usual way. Dishes cleared, good nights exchanged. But as she washed her bowl in the quiet of the kitchen, she felt the fissures deepen. Their conversations, once seamless, now bore the faint cracks of secrets. And as she hung her apron, she promised herself she'd build something stronger, one honest ember at a time. She sat at her desk before dawn, the world outside still draped in pre-light hush. Today was launch day for her first public collection reveal. An email campaign, social posts, a countdown clock ticking against midnight. She'd crafted every word and chosen every image. But with her husband unaware, her reveal would happen in the shadows of their daily life. Her fingers hovered over the schedule button on the email platform. Below, a preview showed her announcement. Introducing Ember & Company's Courage Collection. Fine jewelry for your everyday bravery. She'd included photos of the rose gold flame pendant and 2 new designs, a pair of matching cuffs and a wrap bracelet. She exhaled, recalling the belief that had carried her this far. She hit schedule and closed her laptop. The email would arrive in inboxes at 8 a.m., just as her husband logged into his work. He'd rise, brew his coffee, read his own messages, and she'd never mention it. The thought was bittersweet, like champagne sipped alone in a crowded room. In the kitchen, she prepared his breakfast: eggs scrambled bright yellow, toast lightly buttered. He wandered in, still in a suit jacket, hair mussed from sleep. She placarded the plate with a kiss on the cheek under fluorescent bulbs. He murmured thanks and sank into his seat, reading his phone. She poured herself a cup and watched as his brow arched, an expression she knew well when he encountered unexpected news. She couldn't see the screen, but she sensed the shift, curiosity. Moments later, he tapped his screen, swiped, and read again. "Everything okay?" she asked. He looked up, meeting her eyes. "You got an email from Ember & Company?" She froze. She hadn't lied. She'd simply left out the details. She smiled carefully. "Yes," she said. "It went out this morning." His silence stretched. He set his cup down and reached for his laptop. "I thought you were done with hobbies," he said, voice measured. She met his gaze, the ember inside her burning bright. "Ember & Company isn't a hobby," she replied softly. "It's my future." His eyes flickered with something between surprise and pride. She held her breath, waiting for dismissal or doubt. But in that quiet kitchen, with the sun rising on her reveal, she felt the first true glow of recognition. She heard the quiet before she saw the group. Gathering at the end of the hallway, 3 neighbors exchanged hushed tones, glancing toward her door as she stepped out with a package in hand. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the carpet, and for a moment she felt the ember of her courage flicker under their scrutiny. She offered a polite nod, but they fell silent, eyes darting away as she passed. In the elevator, murmurs drifted through the metal walls. "She's so ambitious. Is she trying to start a side business? I thought she was just an accountant's wife." Their voices were low, but everyone on the next floor could hear. Back in her apartment, she set the package on the counter, samples for a new client's approval, and paused. The whispering followed her inside, a reminder that success often breeds gossip. She ran a hand through her hair and reminded herself, every sale, every milestone was worth the risk of being talked about. The phone rang, a call from her mentor, the independent jeweler who'd first encouraged her to take the plunge. After greeting her warmly, he asked about the samples. She described the new designs, her voice buzzing with excitement. He congratulated her. "It's natural they're talking. You're shaking up expectations." His words settled around her like armor. Hanging up, she laid out the new pendants on the kitchen table and examined each curve under the lamp's glow. She thought of the neighbors' whispers and let their doubts stoke, rather than smother, her resolve. That evening, a notification pinged on her laptop. Another boutique inquiry, this one from across the country. She smiled, imagining their faces when they saw her pieces in person. Later, over a quiet dinner with her husband, she kept the news to herself. He didn't ask, and she didn't offer. In the soft glow of the lamp, she realized that some victories were too bright for casual conversation. As she washed the day's dishes, she touched the pendant at her throat and felt the strength it represented. Let them whisper. In every hushed word lay proof that she was no longer hidden. She was a maker, a dreamer, a force, and her spark would not be dimmed by gossip. She froze when her phone buzzed midday. A message marked urgent from her production partner. Before opening it, she steadied her breath. When she finally tapped the notification, the email's header flashed. Ember and Company. Purchase order confirmation. She scrolled, heart pounding, as she read that a national lifestyle retailer wanted 500 pendants, the rose gold design, delivered in 6 weeks. Her world tilted. 500. The numbers swam before her eyes. Metal costs, engraving time, packaging, shipping. She pictured her little home office overrun with inventory, her evenings stretched into frantic assembly lines. And under it all, the thrill of possibility. This order could change everything. She closed the message and replayed it in her mind, willing the words to sink in. Then she tapped reply. Her fingers flew as she confirmed details, delivery dates, and payment terms. She proposed a small deposit to cover initial metal costs and promised weekly progress updates. Each sentence felt monumental, as if she were building a bridge between her secret dreams and her emerging reality. After sending, she sank into her chair. The hum of the dishwasher in the next room sounded like applause. She imagined her husband walking in and asking what had her so pale and flushed. She pictured herself telling him, "I have an order for 500 pieces." That image made her smile. Instead, she resisted temptation. She closed her laptop and walked away, her footsteps echoing down the hall. In the living room, her husband looked up from his novel. "Everything okay?" he asked. She nodded, voice steady. "Just paperwork." He sniffed and returned to his page. She exhaled. Paperwork. That was all it looked like. Later, she organized her workspace for the coming weeks. Metal samples lined up, engraving tools cleaned, shipping labels at the ready. She sketched a production timeline on a whiteboard. 6 weeks of deadlines, checkpoints, quality controls. Her pulse raced with logistics, but also with purpose. That night, she lay in bed awake, the lamp on her nightstand casting soft shadows. She thought of the customers who would wear her pendants, the retailers who would display them, and the life that would follow. Fingers interlaced over her chest, she whispered a vow. "I will deliver." In that commitment, the ember of her ambition roared into flame. She slipped a pizza box onto the kitchen counter, the warm scent of cheese and garlic filling the tight space. He walked in, suit jacket draped over one arm, and paused at the cardboard box as if spotting an odd contraption. "Chinese again?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. She shook her head and lifted the lid. "Pizza," she said. "Figure we could do something low-key." He nodded and set his jacket on a chair, watching her arrange plates and napkins. They ate in silence for a few bites. She'd called ahead to pick it up between production calls, juggling the order confirmation on speakerphone while the clerk read out her pickup number. Now, she savored each slice, but sensed the tension pooling like oil beneath water. He cleared his throat. "We need to talk about our finances," he said, swallowing a bite. "The grocery bills are higher than usual." She felt a flicker of apprehension. This was the conversation she'd been postponing for weeks. She placed her napkin down and met his gaze. "I know," she replied calmly. "I've been—" She hesitated, tracing a pepperoni slice with her fork. "I've been covering some business expenses." His fork hovered, and he frowned. "Business expenses?" He leaned forward, voice low. "What business?" Her breath caught. She'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, but the reality felt sharp. She set her own slice down. "I started Ember and Company," she said, watching surprise flash across his face. He blinked. You what? She drew a control breath. It's a line of jewelry I've been designing, producing, and selling pieces online. I've had orders, even a wholesale contract. It's why our joint account seems off. The tension in his posture deepened. He rubbed his temple. You should have told me. She nodded, voice steady though her heart pounded. I know. I wanted to prove it could work before asking for support. He leaned back, exhaling. You're talking about serious money, Bianca. He glanced at the nearly empty pizza box, her dinner of stolen moments. And you spent how much? She named a modest sum, carefully tracked in her hidden ledger. He shut his eyes, then opened them, searching her face. In his gaze, she saw not anger, but the weight of recalibration. After a long pause, he stood and walked to the window, arms folded. She watched him in the reflection, knowing this was their turning point. The takeaway dinner, once a simple convenience, had become the stage for truth. And as he faced her at last, she braced for the path forward, together or apart, knowing she'd chosen honesty over comfort. She dropped the last ember pendant into a padded envelope and sealed it with a practiced flick of her wrist. It was part of a rush order for a bride who'd forgotten to mail her wedding gift, overnight shipping only. The courier's deadline was 5 p.m., and her workshop clock read 4:42. Her husband passed through the living room, pausing to ask what the racing engine noise was. It was just her printer finishing a batch of invoice sheets. She said, voice even. He nodded and continued downstairs. She sprinted to the front hall, grabbed her purse and a stack of prepared parcels, and dashed to the car. The late afternoon sky was a bruise of purple clouds, a hint of rain. She navigated the residential streets with laser focus, ignoring the detours from construction cones. At 4:58, she skidded into the curbside lane of the courier depot. A flashing sign read, closed in 2 minutes. She leaped from the car with 2 packages in hand, rushing past a line of clients and their rolling suitcases. Overnight drop-off, she panted, setting the first envelope on the counter. The clerk punched her in with a nod. She handed over the second, eyes on the clock above him. At 4:59, the package scanned in. Success. The clerk stamped it next-day delivery. Back in her car, she exhaled, wet with triumph. In her rearview mirror, her reflection was pale but alight, proof she could meet impossible demands. That evening, she updated her tracking sheet and sent confirmation emails. Each entry held its own drama: recipient, origin, destination, status. She clicked Notify Customer. Moments later, her phone buzzed, a thank you note from the bride. Relief wove into pride, her promise kept. He peeked into her office as she organized shipping receipts. Long day, he asked. His tone held an unfamiliar respect. She swiveled her chair, smiling. A good day, she replied, tapping her tracking log. Everything's on schedule. He studied her for a moment longer, then nodded and left. She returned to her desk, heart steady, knowing she'd passed this test. The overnight shipping challenge had proven her capability and confirmed that, when her ember burned brightest, nothing could hold her back. She stood behind the counter at the boutique pop-up, her heart thudding beneath her blouse. A woman tapped her foot on the other side, arms crossed, expression stern. I'm missing a pendant, the customer said, sliding a photo of the shipment packing slip across the marble. Order 342. Only 2 arrived when I paid for 3. Her stomach dipped. She'd packaged each order herself, double-checked quantities in her home office. Yet here was the discrepancy. She picked up the slip, studied the printout, then met the customer's gaze. Let me help, she said, voice calm despite her racing pulse. Behind her, the boutique's owner peered around a rack of scarves. She reminded herself, this was her business now, and mistakes were part of growth. She apologized and offered to resolve it immediately. Pulling her tablet from beneath the counter, she logged into her order management system and located the order. The third pendant was marked shipped, but tracking was blank. The customer's foot tapped again. She kept her tone steady. It appears the third item never scanned in at the depot. I'll ship a replacement express overnight and refund any shipping costs. The customer's eyes flickered between doubt and relief. I need it by Friday, she said. I'll make it happen, she assured her, tapping the tablet. I'll email you confirmation and the new tracking number by end of day. As she hit send, she felt the weight of responsibility shift into confidence. The customer nodded, folding the slip and handing it back. Thank you, she said quietly. After the woman left, the boutique owner approached. You handled that well, she said, voice approving. I'll feature you in our next newsletter. She blinked in surprise and relief. Thank you, she managed. Underneath, pride swelled. The confrontation had tested her crisis skills, and she'd passed. That night, she drafted the replacement order, sealed the new pendant in a velvet pouch, and scheduled the courier pickup. Each action was a declaration. Ember and company stood on integrity as much as design. And as she closed her laptop, she felt a quiet thrill. Every challenge was another step toward her dream. She stared at the subject line blinking in her inbox. Ember and Company. Feature in Glimmer magazine. Her breath caught before she clicked it open. The editor's message scrolled into view. We loved your story and your designs. You're the cover feature of our June issue. Attached is the preview draft. Please review and let me know if you have edits. Her fingers trembled as she downloaded the PDF, its glossy layout showcasing her rose gold flame pendant against a stark white background. Beside it, a tagline read, From Kitchen Table Dreams to National Spotlight. Below, her photo, taken months earlier for a small blog, showed her holding a pendant at her collarbone, eyes bright with purpose. She scrolled down to read the article draft, highlights of her secret launch, the midnight messaging, the wholesale breakthroughs, even her tension-filled dinner conversations. The editor had woven together anecdotes she'd only shared in private emails. As she read, she felt both exposed and validated. A line caught her eye. Balancing her family life and her burgeoning business, Bianca's journey embodies the resilience of modern women forging their own paths. Her breath caught, her real name in print, her hidden venture finally out in the open. Her heart thundered. She imagined her husband seeing this story before she could explain. Would he feel proud or betrayed? She hovered over her laptop's reply field, mind racing with revisions. She could ask to change her name, soften details, delay publication. But each hesitation felt like dimming her own spark. Instead, she typed, Thank you so much for this beautiful feature. I have no edits. This tells my story exactly as I want it shared. I look forward to seeing the final layout. Best, Bianca Caldwell. She hit send and leaned back, eyes closed. The glow of the screen lit the room like sunrise. With one email, her secret world and her public identity had merged. Her husband knocked at the door, voice gentle. Everything okay? She wiped her eyes, tears of joy and nerves, and called back. Yes. Can you come here for a moment? As he entered, she held out her laptop. On the screen, Glimmer magazine's draft cover stared back. In his eyes, she saw surprise and then awe. And in that revelation, she knew her ember had truly become a flame. He stood in the doorway, mouth slightly open, eyes flicking between her and the magazine cover glowing on the screen. The headline above her photo read, Bianca Caldwell, lighting her own path. For a moment, neither of them spoke. She held her breath. He was seeing everything. Her secret hours, her whispered dreams, her rise from kitchen table sketches to national recognition. At last, he closed the distance